So with me today, we have Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hey, everyone. Glad to
And
be
we have
back.
Damien Bruley.
Good afternoon, everyone.
And in this session, we're going to be talking just kind of a roundtable. We're going to be going through, the basics of VCF again, just a little bit, and kind of how it's built. And we're going to be talking about NSX security specifically, but in conjunction with Aria automation. And Jason is our security expert and consultant, and Damien is our Aria automation and orchestration expert and operations, all things VMware. So you guys want to do a quick intro of your background for everybody real quick? Jason?
Yeah, sure. Jason Masson, the consultant, security consultant here at 27 Virtual. And as Bill mentioned, I squarely focus only on security deployment. So the distributed firewall, IPS, any of the advanced features. And I work heavily in conjunction with Damien, with customers to line up their security models and their security vision in order for him to get that into an automated fashion.
Awesome. Damien?
Yeah, so good afternoon. So I've been in the automation cycle for probably 10, 15 years now around VMware, and I'm specialized on Aria automation and everything about Aria Suite now, including operations and anything that we can automate. That's our goal.
Awesome. So basically we have, two, I think the very best people on our team. You got somebody in Jason that specializes in security, and you got somebody, Damien, that specializes in automation. And we kind of put these two guys together, and they came up with some really interesting solutions. And we're going to talk about those more in just a minute. So we're going to talk about 27 Virtual, just a bit, who we are as a company. We're going to talk about building your private cloud with automated security, like what a private cloud should look like. Then we'll cover security design at a high level. And the real focus is going to be on number 4, which is the Aria security automation. That's the real focus of this discussion. And we may touch on some other topics there and remove that out. So 27 Virtual. So 27 Virtual is a VMware only partner. We've been in business since 2008, providing education. We have trained literally tens of thousands of folks on all things VMware since 2008. If you can imagine, back in the heydays of vSphere, an ICM class, a vSphere ICM class, or an NSX ICM class, the Ninja program that we're known for. Been doing that since 2013, 2014-ish, and all sorts of other training. So just a real strong background in education. And then consulting since 2017. We've done 275 plus deployments, probably, I think it's up to 300 now to date, deployments of all different types of VMware solutions for all different types of VMware customers to date. You name it, we've done it. 141 NSX design deploys, 50 NSX V2T migrations, 20 VCF deployments, 20 plus Aria automation operation deployments. Partner of the Year 2023, Application Network and Security, in large part and thanks to Jason and Damien's work that they've done out in the field, because they've been leading the charge on a lot of this stuff and the coolness that we bring to that. So within the stack, the VMware by Broadcom mantra these days is VCF. There's different bundles. There's like an Essentials kit. There's a VBF kit. But if you want to really get all the bells and whistles, you got to go with VCF. And VCF includes the key components that we're going to talk about today, which is Aria automation and standard orchestration with vCenter, Aria operations for logs, Aria operations for networks. Many of you may know that as Verni, potentially. And also, if you guys have any questions, you can post things in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that. So if you're in the session and you're monitoring that, you can definitely post questions in the chat. Now, we can't type and respond in the chat, but we can come back verbally if needed. So VCF is your core product. And then what we're doing is, as a VMware only partner, we're adding on this firewall add-on, and that gives you everything you need. So the firewall add-on is very important, so you can do all the cool stuff that Jason's going to talk about. And then the Aria automation is what Damien's going to focus on. And then the operations for logs and networks tie into the security, because you need those tools to make the whole thing work. So get out there and build that private cloud, folks. And if you get an on-prem environment and you have VCF, you can fully operationalize that. And you can get that private cloud built so it operates just like something you have at AWS or the VMware cloud solutions out there, and basically make it work just like a public cloud, but within your own environment. And you can do that with different VCF combinations. I'm not going to talk about any of those details today, but there's single site with the SCDC manager. There's stretched. If you got like a metro environment, you can stretch the cluster if your latency is real low between data centers. You can have a remote cluster. Like if you're a factory and manufacturer, you got a remote edge. You can build that as well. And we can also support multi-region VCF deployments. And then these Aria components and these NSX components that Jason and Damien are going to talk about can leverage a multi-region deployment where security is deployed globally. We're doing a deployment for a customer right now where they have 5 global data centers, and we're able to do NSX security across all of those. So some pretty interesting stuff for sure. Now, you don't have to deploy the SCDC manager. If you purchase a new VCF license suite, you can just leveraging the licensing model, download your license keys and just deploy it as is. You don't necessarily have to have the SCDC manager. So Jason, I'm going to flip it over to you, and Jason's going to talk about some of the different tools that we need to kind of get started. So Jason, take it away.
All right. Yeah. So as Bill mentioned, one of the key utilities that we use in security side, especially on the microsegmentation front, is Aria Operations for Networks, formerly known as Realized Network Insight. Most folks know it as Verni, right? And the key thing, and we're not going to deep dive into these tools, but the key thing here is that this is sort of your insight into your applications, into what your networks are doing, that give you the important bits of information for you to create a policy and a rule set to secure your application, right? It's in our or we call it a visibility tool, right? Because we're getting that insight, that visibility into what the apps are specifically doing, maybe that you didn't quite know before, right? Orgs, application owners change. There's a lot of legacy stuff. Maybe we don't have the insight. This is the tool that's going to give us that key information to get our security policy and posture that we're looking for.
So you mean like I got a firewall rule, source, destination, and then it helps me find out the ports that things are talking on?
Correct. Yeah, it'll help you not only find ports, but a lot of times when we work with customers, older applications, for example, tend to be sort of like a black hole, right? It exists, and because there's no policies preventing it from working, it can exist with little or no knowledge of the actual underpinnings. But when we want to apply security, we need to understand fully how the application works, what endpoints is it connecting to, what ports is it connecting to, and this will give us the tools or the insight really in how to go about structuring a policy that will then micro-segment that application.
And when we talk about micro-segmentation, if I already have like a Palo Alto firewall, is this something I still need? So if I have a Palo Alto firewall and I purchase VCF, do I still need this additional security? Like what's the difference between like a north-south firewall and doing this type of micro-segmentation in somebody's environment at a high level?
Yeah, that's a great question, and this is a topic that we broach with almost every customer, right? They have an existing security infrastructure that we sort of have to blend with, right? We need to mesh with that. So a traditional Palo or perimeter device will more than likely handle all the traffic that's going out to the public internet and coming into the network, right? So that customers can access applications internally or VPNs, what's not. Where our core strength is from a micro-segmentation standpoint is that east-west traffic, right? What's happening within the network? What's happening from application to application, from VM to VM, from our customers at our branch offices to our VMs. Those types of things can all be encompassed into what is postured as east-west traffic, right? So they can work well in conjunction, and we don't have to sort of get rid of existing technologies. We can supplement and bolster those existing technologies.
So the vRealize Network Insight or the Aria Operations for Networks is a tool that helps me identify traffic flows and helps me figure out how applications are talking so I can then craft firewall rules around it.
Perfect.
For the east-west security that you just described.
Correct. Yeah, and it will even give us insight beyond that. It's I think squarely aimed at that, but it can give you info on what any VM is doing, right, or any
Mm.
physical device that you connect to it. So in our use case, we're squarely using it to identify east-west traffic, but it does have the ability to give us that extra level of insight, so that you might actually be able to use it in crafting your policies for a Palo Alto or for different edge device.
All right. And then we have Aria operations for logs. What is this one about?
So Aria operations for logs is exactly as it says, right? It's a syslog aggregation tool. So this will give us a centralized location for our VMware environment to send its syslog data. If we're taking it under the lens of microsegmentation, we use syslog data as a validation tool, right? To say, hey, this rule set that we've crafted with all that data coming out of operations for networks, is it doing exactly what I expect it to do? And also gives us a very strong opportunity to say, hey, did we actually miss anything? Did we, um, catch something that was outside the window that operations for networks gave us? So think about the once a month activities, or maybe the once a quarter activities. This is our tool that we can catch that.
So this was more of a broad stroke, but pretty good. And then you get everything in place, and then you come in behind it, and then you do kind of this final validation, if you will.
Exactly. This gives us the confidence that when we're about to secure our application, that it's going to do what we expect it to do, right? The crossing the T's and dotting the I's. That's what this tool is.
Okay, great. So it sounds a little complicated, though, Jason. Can you talk about the security design? I would assume that if you're building firewall rules for somebody, you just don't sit down and just start cranking out rules. Is that a fair assessment?
That's completely right. The cranking out of rules is sort of towards the tail end of any security design. It's in some respects sort of the easy bit, right? So one of the things that we as a company, 27 Virtual, do is we take customers through a holistic security design workshop and knowledge transfer education. And we fully embed ourselves and make ourselves really a part of the team, so we can fully understand the entire environment. And some of the things that we bring to the forefront for consideration are what you sort of see on screen here. Environmental isolation. Do we need to take into consideration, separating, say, the production network from a test network, right? These things can all coexist on the same ESX host, but by policy, if we're mandated to, or the desire is there, we can separate them. They cannot talk to each other, right? There's no communication between. Industry compliance, right? This is often a big thing for healthcare and finance industry. There's certain things that must be in place as we drive down this journey. A lot of times also customers will reach out to us. There's been maybe some security event sometimes, but or if they just have sort of like an annual audit, and we need to make sure that we sort of check the boxes and provide the security that those audits are asking for, so that we can pass that audit next time. And a big thing is zero trust, right? We'll have a deny by default environment where traffic will only traverse if we have an allow rule for it, right? That is often the pie in the sky, the end goal for many customers. And this is sort of a framework to get us there. And then within all of that, there's always challenges. And so sometimes they're organizational, sort of like change management, security approval processes. We make sure that whatever processes that we develop for the distributed firewall are also going to be in alignment with those internal, you know, policies or change management, like I said, any of those things.
I mean, that zero trust is like It reminds me of something my parents said, don't trust strangers, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, that sounds like a difficult one to achieve. Have you had an experience with one of those yet as of
Yeah,
today?
we've done that for a few customers here at 27 Virtual. And so the guidance and our design process is proven to be able to take customers there, right? So especially when we're talking about bringing in automation into the fold, automation can do some of that heavy lift that, to alleviate what they term as click ops, right? Sort of that administratively intensive work, and that'll accelerate the path to getting there.
So basically, the summary of this slide is there's a process to getting it implemented, and there could be different ways of architecting the security solution. So even though it's like you can generically say you're going to do microsegmentation with a VMware platform with NSX, but within that, there are many different considerations, many different ways to architect the solution based on the customer's needs.
For sure. Yeah, we get started out with most times a blank slate, and our job as a partner is to work with a customer to mold the distributed firewall into the perfect solution for them.
Right. Okay. And one thing that I saw, I was on a call with the customer just yesterday, and one thing they were talking about is actually using both solutions. They have a physical Palo Alto firewall and they have NSX. And what they were going to do is leverage the Palo Alto firewall to do security between segments
Sure.
and leverage the NSX firewall just within the segment. Right.
Very, very valid use case. I would say it's not as common as what we see, and normally most customers, but we have done that for many customers as well, right?
Right. So, like a real simple solution, it could also be NSX security where customers are just using regular port groups, not necessarily NSX overlay, which might be too technical for this discussion, but there are different ways that you can architect it, right? So you could do just NSX security in a regular VLAN, NSXT, VLAN back port group, or you can do security on an overlay segment. Can you talk about that just for a minute?
Yeah, for sure. So the VLAN back segments are, I think, are more analogous to a traditional vSphere port group, right? There's no software defined networking, there's no overlay networking involved with that, and relies more heavily on the physical network for data transmission. So we can align with that very easily, and from a security perspective, it doesn't necessarily matter for us. The distributed firewall will do it either way. You do get some additional bells and whistles if you do the overlay networking, meaning you get the edge firewalls, right? And again, maybe a little bit too technical for this conversation, but that does add a little extra capability where you can have enforcement for different types of traffic, positioned either on the edge or the host.
All right, so let's talk about this graphic. What is this all about?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that even though we are talking about customizing a solution for each customer, we still want to make sure that we as a partner and as a customer are aligning with VMware's best practice, right? And VMware's best practice is sort of laid out for us not only in this graphic but also in the user interface for NSX, which categorizes specific types of traffic, and we align the solution, the custom solution, and merge it with VMware's best practice, right? So for like an emergency category, as it says on screen, we're thinking about maybe staged rules, so that if there's some sort of anomaly or something, we can have rules that are easily enforceable that may quarantine a workload or allow specific traffic. And infrastructure category, we're talking about those global services. Maybe even before we get a user on a VM, an IT department has core services that are required just to stand up a VM, right? The DNS, the NTP, backup, any management, connectivity, group policy, that sort of thing. And then drilling down into the environment category, that's where we would position, as we talked about on one of the previous slides, do we need to create isolations between large segments of the network, production from dev, like HR from accounting, that type of thing. And then drilling down, we get into really the more granular policies of how an application actually functions, how it interacts with other applications, how roles within an application actually interact with each other. How, for example, how does an end user connect to the web server? How does the web server then connect to an app server? And how does an app server then connect to the database server? And once we get down to that level, then we're looking at policy enforcement. And then, as it says, the default policy is where we sort of change the overall behavior of the firewall to be sort of a zero trust, deny by default or allow by default.
Right. So that application category reminds me of when NSX first came out several years ago, that classic web app DB tier kind of protection. And it's still valid today, right? It hasn't gone away, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct. And if anything, since then, things have just only gotten more complicated, right? There are more VMs. There's more roles per VMs.
So on this slide, I guess the point here is to kind of like, can you just tell us how to do it, Jason? Like, what's the easy button?
Yeah, well, the easy button comes, I think, after we get through all of these decisions, right? And then that's where Damien will come in, right? He'll make our life easy. And so, but I just want to make sure that we had this on screen, right? Because I think this is a key thing that folks sort of who dive into our automation before taking real consideration for some of these things, often will falter, right? So one of the key methodologies that we use for automation is the NSX tagging infrastructure. And you can almost consider that as like metadata for your VMs. So we craft specific tagging naming conventions, using like a tag and a scope. So maybe like a tag of prod, but a scope of environment, so that we know this prod tag is talking about environments. So that way, when you get into the automation tool, and you have like a drop down, it says prod, then you get that tag, etc. Groups, we want to name groups in a fashion that reflect exactly what their entities are, right? So oftentimes we'll take sort of a hierarchical structure to it where it's like a prod, maybe dash app one dash web. And that'll give us, at a glance, very tight, concise data so we know exactly what we're working with. Services are those layer 4 and layer 7 attributes that we can then use to tighten up our firewall policies, right? So, and maybe an example here is, instead of saying this port 8080 is for app 1, it might be more beneficial to us to really spell that out and say TCP-8080, right? Make it more verbose so we have an understanding of what the intention is. And the same thing for policies and rules. We want to have strong naming conventions that align with the organization's goals, so that at a glance, and we're talking here for ease of management, right? Going forward, at a glance, we can tell, hey, this policy is intended to supply a rule set to either allow or deny very specific traffic. And then we get down to our rules, which then are even more granular, right? So it's important, and the big picture here really is we need to have this sorted out so that then we can really take this as like a blueprint and say, hey, Damien, this is what we want for you to help us with.
I guess the important point there would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when I go to deploy a workload or a VM, that workload can have multiple tags, right?
It can, yeah, and oftentimes that's sort of the structure that we may choose, right? Where NSX has the ability to define groups that are dynamic, right? So if you have one or more tags, you may enter this security group, right? So, and then that's something I think we're going to demo here shortly.
So I just pulled up this. Can you kind of describe? That's kind of like a segue, right? So in this graphic, what is it showing us here?
So yeah, so on our far left, we have sort of the production environment, right? And then we have on the far right a list of different tags, right? And then down the middle, we have our development environment. And so what the graphic will show is that based on the tags that are assigned to a virtual machine, then it may enter one or more security groups, and one or more security groups may then be defined in a security policy that will define the security posture for that VM. In this case, the example should probably be aligned with, hey, we are deploying new VM. We know right away what the tagging should be, so then the VM can be stood up immediately with the security posture that we desire.
I have a question though. What if it's a VM or an application that I've never done I don't know anything about it? Do I have to go back through the discovery process again with something brand new? Like, where does this apply? Is this for something where I have a known entity and I can just tag it? Or can it be something brand new maybe I haven't done discovery on? How does that work?
A mix of both. In real world, this would likely be more aligned to a well-known entity in the sense of maybe we want to scale out our application, and it's sort of a clone or a sister VM of doing the same thing. So we want to make sure that it's aligned with the right policy, which is what this slide is about to show us.
And we can do this all manually. Do you have a demo you want to show real quick?
Yeah, we can sort of show what the click ops version of that looks like.
Okay. I'm going to stop sharing so you can go ahead and show everybody your screen.
All right. Let me know when you guys can see that.
Looks good.
All right. So here we're logged into NSX. I've already logged in. And if we were going to apply tags to a virtual machine, there are one of two ways to do it. I'll show you one way, and that's from the tagging interface. So what we're going to do is we're going to tag two virtual machines with three different tags, right? So the first tag that we're going to create is we're going to say a tag name of demo, and then it's going to be an environmental tag. I'm just using shorthand for now, just to speed things up a little bit. And we're going to add our two servers in here, right? So then I'm not exactly counting clicks, but there's been about 5 already, right?
Right.
So we can hit save, and then now
there's a security policy out there somewhere where that group is in a policy, right?
Yeah, we're going to assume that. So we're going to say that if we're adding this in, then it will make one. One of the things that I'll step through here too is show you sort of the extra step of how that, if you were to manually create the groups, right? Groups is a part of the conversation. Groups is the entity that we use as our source or destination, and it's something that VRA will also be able to automatically create for us as well, right? So if we quickly create a payroll, and this is, we're saying, for example, our payroll, these guys are part of payroll. We're going to save that guy. And then these are our new web servers, right? So it is a web and a scope of role, because we're saying this is a web server. So we're going to say R2 servers, right? Hit apply, save. So now we're going to create a security group that then defines that entity, right? So as I mentioned before, we'll sort of just go with like a generic example that we see sort of with a lot of customers, where the naming convention of a group is the environment, the application, and then the role, right? So as you sort of go to the right, the definition gets more granular. And in order to define that, so we're going to say we're going to add a criteria, and our tag is we're doing the demo. First, you have to have the demo tag, right? The environmental tag. Then next, we have to have the specific application tag, and then finally, we have to get our role tag, right? So what we're verbosely saying here is, in order for you to become a member of this security group, you must have all three tags. And we just did that before, right? So we're going to apply, save, right? And then I'm just going to search quickly for a demo to make our life easy. And in this case, we can see we have our two groups, right? So now imagine, not that it's overly difficult work, but if you have a large environment, thousands of VMs, hundreds of apps, then you can see how this bit of work can become intensive, and we would really love if the computer would just do it for us, right? And that's the thing. And then earlier I laid out a sort of a generic group to sort of facilitate the demonstration of saying, hey, if there's an existing group and the VM gets tags that match that definition, it will also become a member of that. In this case, we generically said, hey, we just want all VMs in the demo environment. All right. Then that's it for my demo build.
Okay.
And then I will stop sharing.
So basically what you just showed is doing this in the interface, like defining
Exactly.
the group and the tag and then associating the VMs to the tags. And I guess what we want to be able to do is, not that this is bad, right? This is a good solution. Using grouping and tagging is definitely the way we want customers to do it based on some design criteria that you've defined within the rule set. But now, you're talking about counting the clicks. So what we found with customers is they want a way to operationalize that. So Damien, now that we've learned the basics about how it works, and we get the VM, I got the animation. So the VM gets added to the group, right? The VM's going to get the tags based on the association. And we just don't want to do clicks to put the VM in the group and get the association. So how can we add VMs to groups, take them out of groups, and basically automate that with Aria automation? So we're going from Jason, who's our security expert, describing and talking about security in general, building groups and tags and applying them. And it's all good, but how can we take it to the next level? And that's where Damien comes in. So Damien, you want to talk about how you would go to that next step with Aria automation?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was a good example what Jason described with the VM, the tags, all the different applications that the VM can be connected to. There's many product on the market that can do that as well. The only thing is that NSX is full of APIs, API based, and everything that you should be able to do in the UI, you can also do it with the API. So you could use that the product from VMware from the Aria suite, which is Aria automation. And again, that's as I said last week during the last session, it's not a new tool, right? It's been there since, I think we started working on that maybe 15 years ago when it was vCenter automation, so VCAG. So it's a product that you could use to deploy machines. But it's more than that. It's a cloud, management portal. So it's going to help you deploying anything as a service. So it could be a VM, and it could be a VM that you wanted to automate the NSX components to it. So I can show you if I share my screen. Just let me know if you see that. But just some example of what you could do. So Aria automation, again, use an orchestrator, what you could send some API command and do exactly what Jason showed you with the UI. Like this one, for example, there's like maybe 10 lines on that. It's exactly what Jason just did, assigning tag to a single VM. It can be many tags. You see that's an array of properties, so tag could be anything else that you want, and it's just on a single API. And everything is integrated with Aria automation. So you could benefit from the orchestrator. So that's a screenshot for the orchestrator for those who never saw that before. Or you could use Aria automation ABX, which is on the new version that provided that, which can support Python, PowerShell, JavaScript. So there's many ways you can automate the NSX components in there. And something also very important to understand, and I think Jason mentioned that at the beginning, is the key component is to get the data, and the data can be coming from a CMDB. And usually when we start working on those automation projects, we try to understand where can we get those data. Like when you deploy VM, you want to make sure that VM is going to be entitled to the right application, the right data center, the right tags, basically. So which environment should it be connected to? So those could be also pulled from a CMDB, like ServiceNow could be a good example. And I don't know if I go to the next slide. Not sure. Actually, it's like that. Yeah. So that one was a good example. So that's something we did for another customer where we had to integrate with their CMDB. And basically, we created like a catalog item where the end user will deploy the machine. But when they deploy the machine, they want to select which application should that VM be connected to. And it's so you see there's the application name, the environment, the tier, the groups of admin where the machine should be connected to. And all those fields could end up as a tag in NSX. So we have a lot of different workflow that we use. Like this one is a good example. You see step by step. So the first step is the user connects to the automation portal, request the machine, select the fields. Those fields are automatically populated from a CMDB. And based on what the customer or the end user select, it will connect to NSX, create, assign the tags to the VM, create the security group, like Jason said, assign the right tags to the security group. That way the machine is automatically part of the right group. And that group will be linked to the right security policy in NSX, right security group in NSX, security rule. And you can even reposition the rule where you want automatically when the VM is deployed. So that's during the deployment, but you could also do the same thing after the machine is deployed, or for machines that are already deployed, or machines that are even on another data center. So that one was a good example of all the different workflows. So it's still the same. It's still an orchestrated workflow that we use. As you can see, assign the tag, create the group, create the anchor policy, reposition the policy, create the rules, and we also integrate that one with network inside, because we wanted the customer to have the exact same view with NSX and the exact same view of application based in Verni as well. So that was just an example of what you could automate as well. And so and that one is also the day to action. So it's not just deploying the machine, but making sure that machine, the automation is following the full life cycle of the machine, which is your deployment, scale, as you say, scale up, scale out. Anything can be automated as well. And that one is decommissioning. For example, when we decommission, we want to make sure that machine is going to be removed. Maybe the rule is going to be removed if there's no other VM linked to the security group. And maybe clean up some other things like CMDB or Verni in that case. And everything is driven by Aria automation. So you could create some catalog item. And that one was exactly the same screenshot as Jason mentioned before. So you create a group and you want to make sure that group has the right tag assigned to it. That way the group will dynamically have the right membership based. So that one is just an example of something we've done, and the customer asked us also not for the deployment of the machine, but for a machine that has been deployed outside of Aria automation, making sure those machines that are already deployed can be tagged and can follow the same life cycle and process as the other one. Another thing we did, and a good use case as well, is in case you have many different data centers and you want that machine, that VM, when it's deployed, to make sure that if that VM is recovered on another site, those tags will be recovered as well, and everything will be, it could be recreated in NSX if it's a disaster recovery. So again, everything can be also automated. We've done that with other customers, and that's something that a lot of customers asking us to, making sure that VM is going to follow the automation process when it recovers on the second data center. So making sure if that VM is recovered, the VM will be tagged again with the same NSX tags, and the failback will be supported as well once the site is recovered. So it's, I would say, automation now, it's trying to get the full life cycle, making sure all the steps are supported by Aria automation. And we've done some other tools as well, like Ansible, Terraform, as some configuration that we could use for kind of CI/CD, feature.
So if I'm a new, not a new VMware customer, but if I'm going to be a VCF customer, what components do I need to get
So,
this off? What do I need installed to get this going?
so you need Aria automation, which is 3 appliances that will be deployed by the SDC manager in VCF. So everything should be already deployed, I think. If not, then you have LCM, Lifecycle Manager, which is the component of VMware that will help you scale and upgrade, and even deploy new environments. We have some customers that have dedicated environment for test, for UAT, and for prod. So you will use LCM to scale and manage your different environments like that, and maybe move the code. We've done that many times, making sure the customer move not just the VM or anything like that, but when they do a test, it's going to follow the CI/CD process with approval and test, and once the test is validated in UAT, it's going to go back to an approval to get to prod. So that's everything that's going to be managed by LCM, Lifecycle Manager.
So I get all the components installed. Like you two together as a team, can you talk about how you kind of put this together? For customer, where do we start? What's the starting point? So all the components are deployed. VCF is deployed, all the Aria components, the login site. Where do you guys kind of start? What's the starting point?
Usually it's you, Jason.
I was just gonna say I could jump in there. It sort of follows the exact order that we had our slide decks, right? We need to know what we want our distributed firewall to do, to look like, to what sort of boxes do we need it to check before we can really step into automation. That's why that security design is key, right? It informs what the automation will ultimately do and how it will ultimately behave.
Right. So we do the security. So everything's designed and deployed.
Mm-hmm.
So there'd be a security design about how the security is going to work.
Correct.
Right. And then Damien or some of the automation team will need to understand that security design so they can craft the automation around that. Is that a fair understanding?
Correct. Yeah. So and that's what sort of having somebody like 27 Virtual, we have that experience and that knowledge to then be able to translate, like, this is the end goal for my distributed firewall, and now how does this fit into automation?
Right.
And the naming conventions seem to be really important. Like that was like an important part of this, right? So if you don't have a strong naming convention for planning out, not only is that naming convention important for the machine name as well as like the groups and tags? Like, is it the machine name important? The group name is important. The tag name, all those are equally important. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say so.
Right. So good overall VCF architecture design. We can think about it for single site or multi-site, like Damien's talking about for failover. Proper naming conventions, knowing the security design, right? And then, so Damien, what's that very first bit of code, or what does that look like to you? So where do you start? Are you building? What are you building in Aria automation? Is it a workflow? Is it a blueprint? What are you actually doing in there? What's kind of the magic behind the scenes a little bit?
Yeah, so I guess we do step by step, starting with the easiest, just assigning the tags to the VM, and make sure the form that we're going to provide to the end user is aligned with the business intent as well, making sure all the fields are populated and make sense to the user and the application manager as well. And based on that, then after that we can discuss. Is there a good practice for deploying, automating the rules, the policies? Where should they be placed? Where do the deny rules should be automated? All that discussion is going to come in place. But I say usually at the beginning was trying to discuss with the application manager as well, making sure what we do is what they're looking for at the end, making sure the VM, when it's deployed, is completely secured and in the right place. So it's not very technical, to be honest. Very simple, as you saw. I mean, just a few lines of code. There's nothing outstanding, and again, it's public API. So and JavaScript or Python is pretty easy to work with. So it's more a matter of organizing the automation, making sure everything is automated the right way, and all the components are there. As I said, it's not just NSX; it's also anything we could, integrate CMDB, IPAM, anything like that, or even other components. As I said, maybe NSX, Verni, or components like that could be useful to integrate with.
Right.
Because, for example, we've done a use case where the user, he has a catalog item where you deploy the VM, but based on the VM and what he selects, we send a query to Verni, and Verni, based on the whole stack, it already send us a recommendation of the rules where the machine can be deployed. And it's just a recommendation, just an information purposes, So this kind of thing, anything can be automated now with API. So the sky is the limit. It's just a matter of having the customer align as well.
So they're kind of are there two scenarios then? Is there one where the policy is kind of built and there's already a drop rule and you're just tagging the VM and putting it in? It's kind of like one.
Right.
And there could be another one where you're building a new policy where you're still discovering and you haven't put the drop rule in yet. Is that also a possibility?
Right. So yeah, that's a good question. I guess it depends on the customer really and the size of the customer. For a customer that doesn't have much application or business intent, I would say maybe the best way is just to have them populated, pre-populated or pre-created, and the only automation we're going to do is probably just create the security rules, security groups, and assign the tag to the VM. And after that, the VM will land in the right rule because it's already there. But for very large companies that has, maybe 1,000 apps, and the user needs to select which app, and for each app there's different tiers and different environments, so that needs to be automated for sure. You need to automate the rules because each rule is going to be specific to the app that the user selects. So there are different ways, different complexity behind, but usually step by step is the best way to go, not to try to automate everything in the first place. Doing one step at a time might be good.
And then once it's deployed, do we still have to verify everything with Log Insight still? Like, how does that work? I mean, I'm doing all this automation. It sounds great, but am I still doing a check after? Like, what's that day 2 ops look like? Is my team now, I deploy it and I just know it's good, or do I still monitor it? How does that work?
Yeah, so really what happens there is Damien is deploying sort of like a templated base policy, right? Where the app is in an allow state, right? Nothing can impact it. We haven't enforced any traffic. And then the security administrator then needs to come behind and craft that more granular policy, using the information out of operations for networks. And then, as you asked, yes, we still need to validate before we can do any enforcement, right? So, but again, from the automation standpoint, if you're thinking about what has transpired that the administrator doesn't then have to manually do is, they have applied all the tags. We have our security groups. And I say security groups because often there's a tiering of groups, right? You need groups for each role, the app as a whole, and that sort of thing. And then, we don't have to create a manual policy. The policy is waiting for us in the NSX interface, and it has a base set of rules that will allow traffic, and we simply layer on top of that. So we get to the point where we're saying, hey, yes, we're validated, we're confident, this is going to do exactly what we want it to do, and then we can put the cuffs on it.
I see. So it's like a build-up process. And once you get that one done, as you bring in a similar VM or like a clone VM and you're scaling,
Exactly.
that's when it gets really cool, right? Because now I automate it, I tag it, I drop it in, and it's good to go.
Yeah,
right?
and then at that point it's a validation thing maybe for the administrator if they want to take it that far, but it could be just hands off, right? Where VRA will stick it in the right group, the group has a security policy aligned to it, and then it just works.
And then how do I back all this stuff up? So I've got all this stuff deployed, right? And it took me, you brought in 27 Virtual, we're a trusted VMware partner. We come in, we help the customer out with this kind of solution. What considerations do I have around backing this thing up? Is there a chance I could lose the configuration? It sounds like it's a fair amount of effort to get it initially designed, building the infrastructure rules, the environment, getting the automation figured out. How do we back this thing up?
Yeah, I would say that, and I'll let Damien speak to some specifics here in a second, but NSX itself does have a robust backup solution that you can use to, sort of recover from a disaster. But there are other techniques that Damien has developed and 27 Virtual as a whole in order to make certain more granular backups of things like tags, right? Especially when we're talking about in a failover scenario, those things become important. And then Damien, I don't know if you want to layer anything on there.
Yeah, so we had that question with another customer, and we ended up, deploying Aria automation in a second site as well, and make sure both of them are replicated. And if a VM is deployed on one DC and the DC fail, we want to make sure that VM is going to be covered by the other Aria automation platform, and the NSX tag will be assigned as well, because again, the tags is assigned to a local manager in NSX, so it's not by default replicated. So those workflow will replicate the tag and make sure that VMs will be consistently secured. And the good thing with VRA or Aria automation is as well, if the NSX is down and you need to rebuild NSX, all the information is still in Aria automation. So it's just a matter of rebuilding those rules from what have been done in the past. Everything is still there.
So I'm going to back up just a minute. So we talked about the tagging strategy, and you're talking about the clicks, Jason, right? It's a bunch of clicks to get it deployed. And then we moved into automation. And the idea here is to take, even though the grouping and tagging is really good, and it's a lot easier than some other methodologies for implementing security with NSX for that east-west microsegmentation security, we talked about leveraging automation to get rid of any clicking at all. It's a good solution, number one. Number two, clicking is not terrible, but it's not automated. And now the customers have VCF in their data center using the combination of the VCF stack holistically, along with Aria automation, and of course, ops for monitoring, right sizing, day two monitoring, the NSX security, all those things combined, they're able to automate the VM tagging, automate the security group creation, use templated policy creation that you mentioned, Damien. You talked about using a template for policy creation to ease that step. And then when new VMs get deployed, they get tagged and dropped in the group, and they're protected when they land. So the idea is that you have, I guess the point I want to make is customers now with VCF, with VMware by Broadcom, with a VCF solution, they have a full stack. They're building a private cloud. It has full automation, just like a cloud native environment, but you have all these additional security controls and visibility, and your environment. You can meet data requirements and security requirements and build this all out as a complete solution. And then using these different tools to automate everything within the environment. So just to kind of wrap it up, so 27 Virtual as a partner, specifically Jason and Damien specifically, have built a solution for our customers where they can fully leverage all the tools that the VCF suite brings. So you're taking advantage of everything. Now, one thing else I wanted to mention, you touched on this prior to the call we were prepping, is you were talking about a customer that had automated, right? But they hadn't done the security before. Like, there's a benefit to doing everything together, right? It's a complete solution where you're automating, adding the security. Like, can you talk about that just briefly as we wrap it up?
Yeah. In that specific example, it basically, what you get a lot of times in IT departments is there's sort of like a disconnect between sort of the team that's responsible for automation and the team that's responsible for security, right? And then so when we take this, like proven successful method, we marry those two together, right? We make sure that they're in alignment. And in that case, that customer, the automation folks had to go back and redo parts. It wasn't a heavy lift, but still, redoing any work that could have sort of been right at the get-go would have been preferable, right? So it we don't want anybody to do, double work. That's defeats the purpose of automation.
Exactly. So I guess my point on the wrap-up slide is leverage success through a partner like us here at 27 Virtual. We've got all these years of experience of starting out with doing, security projects and automation projects and putting the two together. And as a VMware only trusted partner, our team can provide to you these complete solutions around both automation and security together, whether it's, getting to zero trust or just automating or, a mix of those. We can make that happen. And you can reach out to our team. So our SE for the US is Andrew. I'm the co-founder. You got Damien here and Jacob. If you got any more questions also, Jacob's our lead architect and Jason as well. And our sales team, we have out here in the upper Midwest, we got Brett Welch. In the Southeast, we got Taylor. In the Rockies, we got Spencer. And in California, you got Bryce. So I'll just leave that up there for a minute. If you're in any of those regions of the country, please reach out to your 27 Virtual account executive in that region, and they'll get you connected with our team. And I didn't see any questions in the post, but thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Damien, thank you very much for your time. And again, if you guys have any more questions, just reach out and we'll be happy to coordinate a call. And these same guys on this presentation are happy to get with you and your team and find out what your environment looks like and do like a custom scoping and walk you through, what this would look like specifically in your environment. So thank you very much. We'll see you guys in the next video.